And I'm going to record locally. And do you guys see the chat? Do you want to open the chat on the side? Just in case we lose audio or something, we can usually sort it out through chat. Okay, good stuff. All right. Somebody stopping around.
That was me.
Okay. All right. So now that Brandon and Elaine are here, I'll just go over that again. Moritz was talking to me about two things. What he's doing with his second, third, fourth brain thing, which I'll leave for him to explain at some point. I'll try to get him on here. I'll do an interview. But the other side, he was talking about Project Werewolf, I think it's called, or Operation Werewolf. You guys heard about that?
Yeah, people were talking to me about that because they're like, this sounds like Sheepdog.
Yeah, it does sound pretty similar. He was talking less about their content and sort of theme and more about how they're organizing themselves. So I guess they do a lot of stuff on Telegram. And they have their Facebook and Instagram and stuff as sort of public forums that they don't have a lot of activity on. It's more, public messaging and that. But internally, they have sort of a platform, like a main group, and then within the group, they can spawn off these smaller groups. Anybody can form their own subgroup. And then within the subgroups, they can form more subgroups. So he's talking about how they have main areas. It might be health or it might be professional. And then underneath that, people will spawn regional groups where they're doing stuff in real life. Other guys, they might come up with an interest. And like Gunther was talking about militia and prepping, that would be another group that would form, and then they can split off. And it allows everybody to kind of, I think even in terms of creating their own properties, but pursuing this in their own direction without it fracturing off into 1,000 things. It still kind of stays under one, I don't want to really say brand, but under one umbrella. And where that umbrella becomes important is way stationing. So really what the main group does is it keeps a list of links to these subgroups so people can navigate around these interests on their own. And if a group is doing something they don't like, they just remove the link and nobody can find them anymore. So I thought that was an interesting way where it's not top-down directed, but rather just kind of given a scaffold for things to develop bottom up. So the last week I sent out invites I set up a new YouTube channel and set out invites for management, which most of you guys were on. Because I'm thinking that's one area where we can start, where if, I'm not around to do a weekly meeting, this is what happened last summer. I wasn't around to set up the meetings. They just kind of drop off. With that channel and with the Zoom account, you guys can do it anytime you want on any theme. Go up there, create your own playlist just to kind of archive videos. Like Ray's always got a lot of good videos around training. That could end up being a playlist on that channel so that we all have a place to find this stuff. And sort of a platform for each of you to develop whatever you want out of it. Are you guys with me so far? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything.
Well, I thought Brandon was about to, but yeah, it sounds like, from what I understand, this seems to overlap a lot with Holochain, because it's sort of like you give everyone a certain amount of permission to clone the core content and make their own variation of it, but you set up certain parameters. So like with the werewolves, I was almost like, because they're talking about like religion and ritual, it's almost like that's a type of positiva, and the core of what we're doing is negativa. So as long as no one is violating what we've defined as a reciprocity, then it's like they fit under the umbrella.
Yeah, have at it. Yeah, exactly. So, which I find that our group has, and I don't even think most people realize how much diversity there is in our group, from sort of our Hawaii crew, which is off grid and self-reliant, and probably far more libertarian or open to experience than other guys that are like doing training and stuff. We're across the map, but we're all getting along. I think it's all getting along because on that negativa level, we share that one common ground. So the other thing that I was thinking that we could do immediately is I'll set up a series of threads in the Facebook group as sort of catch-alls. I used to belong to a geopolitical think tank that used to use Facebook like this, very much like what Brandon does with his own page, where we would have a single post. It might be a post on Syria, but then the thread is like 7, 8, 10 years old of just putting files up, and you can go through the thread and follow the whole history of that one region, right? Where I can do something similar to that. Like Gunther's got his own group now with the militia and prepping, but we can set up a thread on that, and then we can dump whatever information we find there, or have whatever conversations we want there. Can have another one for law, another one for health and working out. That's why I invited Lucas if he wanted to get involved. And then we can have these mini communities within the group for now. And then I'll take a look at things like Telegram, where we can expand it out to something that's a little bit more robust. And then I think at some point, like when Hollow has a better framework, because their framework is still a little too close to the machine. It's not a library yet. When that comes out, then we can look at building our own platform. And then that's something that the platform itself, it's not only just a matter of participating within the group on that platform, you could actually take the platform anywhere else you want it in other areas. So, any ideas, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, the only thing with Telegram is me and some of my friends started using Wire lately, so it all depends what you're going for. If you just want to not be deplatformed, and like Kurt was saying, that's the main thing. Mm-hmm. But if you want, security for other people to not be able to read your communications, Wire is probably a better bet. I mean, I don't know if there's any guarantees, but
that's Wire versus Telegram, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll take a look at that as well. Yeah, for me, it's not only the deplatforming thing. I have an issue, like part of the reason why I use Zoom instead of Google for this stuff, there's advantages to Zoom, but I have a local copy of the video. If I'm not retaining that stuff, it's not really my property. I'm just throwing stuff up on somebody else's property, right? So the idea of being able to get a little bit more control over the content that we're creating and the conversations and that, and be able to actually manage it and retain it. In Hollow Speech, it would be like we don't have a solid enclosure yet. Things just kind of come in and then flitter away. So I'm looking at trying to create enclosures within enclosures that each of you can take on your own. So look at the cat, so sweet.
Is there some backup of the Facebook material?
No, that's what I was working on with Elaine to see if we could get the content down. Right now, we're just dumping it in my WordPress server. But yeah, that's another one. I think Gunther mentioned setting up a wiki.
Yeah, that would be the best, because what Brandon's doing is awesome until they close the group.
Right. And then it's all gone.
Yeah.
And then I posted something. I can't remember what the article was, but immediately after, I got a notification from Facebook saying, as a group moderator, if there's banned material on the group, they'll close the group down. You'll be able to view it for 2 days, but then it'll be gone. It'll be deleted. And I was like, oh, okay. That's shots across the bow. So yeah, the idea of getting the information down and retaining it. And then ultimately, if there was something peer-to-peer where everybody's holding their own copy that we can reconstruct if there is a breakdown somewhere, I think is the end game.
And retaining it in a way that's easy to search. So when I started the group that I run, I started on Facebook, and after about 3 months, people were never reading the original posts.
Right.
That's why I started a website, because it was easier for them to search it.
Okay.
The information that we're working through here is very hierarchical. That's why the wiki is excellent.
Right.
And a very simple solution to that for the short term is whatever server has the wiki files, I think, follow a certain format that is like a certain structure that can run on different wiki platforms. If we have a wiki and the wiki file, the main database, is saved somewhere on a Dropbox and we just all share the box, that's a real cheap and easy one-day setup. Don't need to worry about someone else's developing new technology solution to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the things that I was thinking, because I run my own server space, is run backups to a zip file on the server and just automate it, just a cron job that dumps it, say, every morning at 5 o'clock. So that, and then everybody has access to that folder for download. The redundancy and automation is good. Hey, Brian. That's a good point. So searchability and archiving and redundancy. Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm having some computer issues. Make sure y'all can hear me. Hey, Bill,
You're a little quiet, but I can hear you.
Yeah. Hey, I'd want a discussion of the overall concept, sheepdog concept related to proprietarianism. And I kind of feel like we're, as far as the internet goes and Facebook, we're all on the same page, but we're isolated physically thousands of miles apart.
Mm-hmm.
And when the shit hits the fan, when this whole thing goes down, we're basically alone.
Right.
So my thing's white survival. My thing's survival, forming a tribe here.
Well, and that's, go ahead.
Well, I love what's going on. I love what's doing. I'm trying to apply this to myself, my family locally, and I'm really excited about P. Unfortunately, I just got to dive into it deeper. And I've been so busy running my business. I mean, I'm just wide open right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the format that Kurt's got on his website, for me, it's kind of frustrating to dig into it, and it's piecemeal. It's not laid out in a formula. You just got to go dig in, and you just kind of put concepts together. So I was kind of wondering, what's going on is great. I really love it, and it's amazing how we all get along. I'm from the South, and it's just pretty neat how how all this is working.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm trying to formulate how I can take these ideas, take this whole thing, work with you guys, and apply this to myself locally. Because we know, I mean, shit's gonna hit the fan. I mean, this whole house of cards is rotten. So anyway, I just want to get some thoughts on that, Bill, and how we can.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Locally.
Yeah, no, I've got a couple. So you brought up, actually, you hit on three points that I wanted to talk to with you guys today as well. So one, there needs to be, you're right, there needs to be a better ramp up for people understanding P, because how most of us have learned it is just in the thick of it on Kurt's page over a couple of years. And I swear to God, unless you hit one of those epic threads, it can take 6 months before you understand anything that anybody's talking about. So what I was hoping to do is with guys that are newer to it, like yourself, Ray, and I know Brian had mentioned once, Aloha Stephen, had some interest, but also some apprehension. I think maybe next week, Ray, you and I can have a Zoom call and we'll just discuss it. I'll answer your questions. I'll explain as best I can. Do the same thing with Aloha Stephen or anybody else that wants to. And then we not only have the content out there that's easier to digest than diving through a site. It happens, it'll be in the format that seems to be the best way for people to learn it, which is conversationally. So that's the first point. So that's one thing is on my radar as a priority. The Oh, geez, I lost my second thought now. And
I
then
think it's about the real life.
oh yeah. So the second one is I'm wanting to shift. There hasn't been a real direction in my mind for Sheepdog outside of, being a community that has this, sort of a shared understanding, shared class, and so on. I want to have an explicit focus where we're focusing on building agency and helping each other to do that. Whether that's on the local level or with each other in a local area, or if it's getting content out and helping each other maybe get healthier or educate each other or learn skills, and then draw on each other's expertise to build that up. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. Building a more robust middle class and networking to do that. And then the third point was in terms of in real life and the networking that you're talking about, Ray, it's one of the advantages that we have by being this dispersed is right now we have a network of people that span from Iceland to Australia and then all over North America. If we build up our community strong enough, we can all have a place to go. We can all have people to turn to for support, right? And I think that ultimately, outside of the online thing, this is what I'd like to see, where we're almost a fraternity. We have our local regions. One region needs help from another. We're there, vice versa. We'd like to see whether it's professional development, where there might be mentoring going on from older guys with younger guys within a city. Could even be things like trade guilds, because I'm in the trade, so something here where it's mentoring young kids to get into trades and stuff. I'd like to see all of that, where again, it's like a scaffold. We're building a scaffold for the rest of us to stand and build on. Those three points: something for the newbies, a shift in focus to building agency and self-development. So it's less politics, philosophy, law. That'll still be there, but it'll be more on how do we apply this stuff rather than just argue for it. And then the last thing is, the end goal is to then have an in real life network for all of us to build off of. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying I like what you're saying. I like where it's going, and I've just got to do more due diligence on my part. I've just got to find time to dig in and read. And about 2 months ago, I was all fired up. I was going through the core material. Eli Harmon had some good stuff. I was going through the Propertarian website, and I just got swamped. I run a small business. Man, I just got so busy, and I just got so caught up, in my world and my family. I've got 3 kids and a wife, and I just got so caught up. And be honest with you, if you're really going to learn, you got to just spend some time. It's not easy. I mean, you got to really spend some time in it. This isn't a Saturday. This isn't just a casual Saturday afternoon read through, man. You really got to spend some time on it, and I know that.
Yeah,
I'm willing to do it. I just need some. I wish I had a book, man. I'm a book learner. And
whatever you do, don't say that to Kurt.
Really?
People have been all over him about finishing his book for years. So
I got you. I understand, but it's just so frustrating for me to get on my computer and have to look at a computer screen and click links. You know what I mean? You click a link and there's a paragraph, and you go back and click another link and there's 2 paragraphs. I'm like, damn. I mean, it's not a consistent flow with a narrator. It's not. You have to do a lot of digging. But anyway, I understand.
When I first started with Kurt stuff, and the only reason why I was looking at it is there's a couple of young guys that I really respected that just kept pushing Kurt in front of me, and I kept ignoring them because what's this stuff, aristocracy, and then I'd go back off to history on philosophy of science or something, and trying to read it. What happens is you end up reading it thinking you understand what's being written, where the terminology is quite specific and almost reconstructed. It doesn't necessarily give you any assurance that you might be learning something and piecing something together, but it might not be anything to what he's saying or somebody else is saying. So that's why I say it comes back to the conversations where over the constant conversations with Kurt on his wall, you get those subtle nuances and the changes of the meanings of the words that he's talking about until it starts to fit together. And I think on one hand, it's a really good way of habituating knowledge, but it takes a really long time. And I think we don't have the time, and I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I can explain pee in an afternoon, I think, without it being difficult at all. But it won't be, to the level of testimonialism or to the rigor or drawing on the general knowledge that is sort of a requirement of Propertarianism. But I don't think we need that, because we're looking at applying it.
I teach teachers how to teach. And one of the things, and I'm working with the Lego group and others, I'm getting away from that as I'm doing more coaching, but one of the real keys to teaching is teach it at the lowest level possible first, on a broad spectrum with application. Mm-hmm. So if you want to teach someone how to play soccer, you don't get into the theory of physics of why a soccer ball moves when you kick it, because that's not important. What you do is you take a soccer ball, you throw it at them, and you say, kick it. They kick it, and you go, see how it went away? Okay, it didn't go straight. You know why? You didn't kick it with the right part of your foot. And you start doing bit by bit like this, and you build it up from the bottom. Mm-hmm. And the problem is if you get someone who is a physicist to teach soccer, they're not going to start like that. They're going to start with the physics of kicking a soccer ball, or maybe the legalistic stuff of why the rules are the way that they are. Or if they're a historian, they'll talk to you about the history of soccer first. And none of that helps you actually learn to play. And we need to teach people how to play the game. Yeah. They don't need to understand why the car works. They need to understand how to drive it.
Yeah, when I was teaching Buddhism and Taoism, I actually had a lecture that was like that, where I'd spent, it was like 35 minutes describing how to parallel park, because it's something everybody knew how to do, but nobody had ever thought about really what it is you're doing. And the whole point of it was stop asking questions and just do it. Just get in there and do it. And so that's what I'd like to start doing, whether it's conversations like on Sheepdog Howl or us getting it out into things like what we're doing in our lives. So I think that'll help the new guys coming along. So.
I wrote a course about agency development, and I'll send you a copy of it so you can have a look at it. And it's a little more than 30 activities. It says 30, but I added some extras in afterwards. And the activities take you from, I assume the person has very little or no meditation experience, and it takes them all the way through to delving into their psyche and literally reprogramming themselves.
Wow.
By the time they're done, the process should take about 90 days. They will have reprogrammed themselves. And I have a few clients that are connected with P that have tried it and found it effective. The thing is if you're going through the exercises, it's not immediately apparent what you're doing to yourself, but each exercise is relatively easy to understand. And then somewhere along there you go, I feel a lot better, but I'm not sure why. And occasionally people have come back to me and they're asking, why do I feel better? And then you have to get into a deep discussion, but it doesn't matter. They already feel better. They're ready at that point to receive more information.
Yeah, one of with the Mao Shan with Taoism is they wouldn't give you any word teachings until you'd encountered it in your own practice. So give you a practice, you go off. It would give you signposts. Say if this happens or you're starting to feel this, then come back. You go off, you practice. Then when you come back, and they're essentially you've already learned it, and now they're explaining it to you. There's a context for the language, the definitions that you're using, and there's less chance that you're misunderstanding. So they never taught like we're used to teaching until you'd actually encountered it. So it was always student first, and then the actual explicit teaching after.
Well, this is actually fits in very well with the constructivist method of education. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Jean Piaget came up with an idea that he studied and recognized this was true, that You can't learn an idea that's not connected to an idea you already know.
Huh.
So sometimes, imagine all the ideas you know are in a ball over here, and someone's trying to explain something way off to the side. Can't get in the camera, but way off to the side. There's no bridge to connect it. So they're talking, and you're literally, it could be Chinese for all you know. Literally could be another language as well, but could be Chinese for all you know. Then all of a sudden, some years go by, you build bridges out in that area, you hear the exact same thing again, and you go, oh yeah, well that's obvious.
Yeah.
Because now you have the bridge to connect your idea to that idea.
Right.
And they talk about teaching children, for example, and I did this with my son, how to clean up after themselves. So parents come in and yell at the kid that they're messy and they need to clean up. And the kid doesn't know what those words mean. And so it's literally, Levi, get his attention. He looks at you, go, come here. He comes here. Go, you see that thing on the ground? I want you to look at it. You look at it. Pick it up. Pick it up. Okay, now walk over to that box. Walk over to the box. Put it in the box. Good. You just put one thing away. If you do that with all the things, the room is clean. And it's breaking these complex, for us, clean up the room. We don't need anyone to explain that. We're adults. We understand. But somewhere along the line, we had tiny bits of knowledge that built a bridge up to the point where we could understand what that concept meant.
Right.
And how many people do we need to understand P at the level that Kurt and the inner circle understand it? Like maybe 100 people in the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we need another layer below that can teach it.
And then we are.
Yes, exactly. And then we need the mass public.
Yeah.
And we maybe need 1,000 people.
And really what I'm finding the only real necessity that bridges those three layers together is preventing misunderstandings. So one of the things I was trying to have a call with Kurt on is that there's like this initial hurdle. People will learn so much and enjoy P, and then they hit this initial hurdle. And some people don't get past it. And there seems to be a pattern around certain presuppositions that they're holding that are based on misunderstandings of what we're talking about. And it's because they're missing distinctions. There's only 2 or 3 really simple distinctions that need to be included in that initial the initial messaging, so that they don't hit that hurdle. Well, they hit an emotional hurdle too, but that's a different thing. They won't have the malinvestment in these other arguments against P when they hit that sort of those harder truths. So like one of them, because Joel, in Joel's conversation, like Joel was around with us for about 6 or 8 months, and then he kind of left off on his own, and then came back around with Josh. He's still operating from some of those initial misunderstandings. Like when he left, I had the same view that he has right now. And the missing distinctions were just simple things, like the distinction between rule and governance. They're not the same thing. But we collapse the two, and then we live in a world that has those collapsed. So then you naturally come to conclusions that all laws are interpreted, right? And you can't think beyond that, right? So it's just plugging those little holes, right? And I think what Kurt's recognized in our group, because I don't think the guys here are really interested in P for anything other than understanding it. We're not looking for a right-wing revolution per se, not as a primary focus when we're looking at these things. We're looking at it for ourselves. How does this help us? How does this inform our world in that? So when we're speaking it back to people, it doesn't have a lot of loadedness and a lot of noise around our arguments. So he's saying we're the best at arguing P. And I think it's because we have the right disposition for it. And I think that disposition is why we can have such a wide variety of guys, and we're never really under conflict, right? We have, you have guys of very different temperaments in other groups that, content aside, they just irritate each other. We have guys with very different dispositions that are not really irritating each other. Mind you, I've kicked out a few of the guys that were irritating, so maybe that's why.
That whether a group is has these people irritating each other or not is completely up to the leader of the group, because you terminate unwanted behavior, or you shepherd the people away from it.
Right.
Those who won't be shepherded away will have to find another place to get their information.
Right.
That's when you accept, you go into a group. When I'm in my group, I behave differently than when I'm in your group. In your group, you're the boss. And what you say goes. And I'm conscious that I'm not at the top of the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't try to behave like I'm outside the power structure. And so we'll always get along.
Right.
It's a different dynamic. Like I'm completely aware this is your house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We
I
have.
was just thinking some of the guys that I booted out was because they weren't getting that. It's like you come into our house. I'm under the assumption that if you're challenging us, it's because you're there to understand what we're thinking. So we have certain rules and certain definitions. You're going to have to abide by those definitions. And if they don't, then I'm an asshole and I boot them out. So
it's reciprocity. It's a deal. You create this group. We get the opportunity to learn, but in exchange, we don't be assholes about it. Yeah. I don't understand how that's hard for some people to understand.
Yeah. What were you saying, Brandon?
Well, for me, it's revolutionary. I mean, when I discovered P, when I discovered all this, I'm like, damn it, this is the way. Holy smokes, this is it. So I dove right in and realized that I'm part of a network, I'm part of a team.
Yeah.
And I love what I see. I love what's going on here, and I know this is the way. Our democracy, particularly in the States, it's going down. It's over with. I mean, it just can't keep going. And out of the ashes, we got to create something.
Right, and I think there's no better way than to build off of what. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't hear you there.
Yeah, I see that. Can you hear me now? Am
Yep.
I okay?
Yep.
You guys with me? Well, anyway, I just saw this and it resonated with me very deep at a philosophical level. I'm like, holy smokes! I was an Ayn Rand for a while. I was a libertarian for a while. I've been a part of some of these secession movements in the South, and they just didn't. There's just something missing, big missing. When I found P and the Sheepdog group and some of John Mark's videos, it just like wham hit me. This is it. Holy smokes! These guys are right. Kurt's got it. And it's taken me a while to get my get my mind wrapped around a lot of it and get the concepts. But I'm all in. I'm for it. I mean, I don't see any other way. This is it. I've got to nurture this. I've got to grow it. I've got to do my due diligence, and I've got to step up to the plate and do my part to learn it, and to spread it and grow it and to be a productive member. But it's awesome.
You can't help but feel the way that Ray feels if you understand what was created. There's not. You don't get to escape that. So if people aren't where we're at, they're not where we're trying to get them. There's a few things that you guys touched on that I see in people all of the time. One, there's a general knowledge gap. There's a certain amount of things and a certain amount of domains that you have to understand, and you have to understand how they interact to even grasp the core concepts of P or Sheepdog. And secondly, there are perceptual biases that are being strengthened by the environment. So you're being told that you're good at everything and you're smart and you understand this, or you're competent, and then you're faced with something where you're not, and you expect to win. You expect to understand. You expect someone to concede to the way it is that you see things, because the way you see things is right, obviously, because you've never been told it was wrong before. We're running up against actual biological perception blocks. What we do is we create a dialogue that moves in one direction. The ability to spot ridicule, rally, moralize, gossip, the ergasm. The ability to spot it is important in moving dialogue forward, because as soon as it devolves into something where someone instead of some idea is the center of attention, we have a problem where we've stopped because we're dealing with someone instead of the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then what I also found as I got further into arguing with P is eventually you hit on what Kurt says, where the use of these things is a response to an incentive, which then it does come back to now you're addressing the person. But what you can then do is by addressing the topic, it reveals the incentive. So I would have debates with people on P, and it would reveal a bias or an incentive that I had that was never directly mentioned in the conversation. Like it wasn't saying you have this bias or incentive. It would reveal itself. That's what would allow me to drop it and get to a sort of a new level of objectivity. So I still have my bias. They just don't have the same influence.
I found it easiest, and I've maybe converted a dozen people in private messages over to proprietarianism. I found it easier to find someone who understands the goodwill of a conversation and knows what it looks like when a conversation gets bogged down or when you start going in a circle. If they understand those rules, then I attempt to enter in at their strongest bias. If it's a woman, you go right for woman stuff right away. That usually casts them aside right away. It's like, you're not ready yet, and I move on to someone else, because we're looking for people that can teach it. Those people can be taught, and if they can't be taught quickly, and we're on a time crunch, we don't have time.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think the best conversation I ever had was my very first conversation with Brian. We were talking about anarchy, right?
Yeah.
And it was a great conversation, but it was a great conversation because we were amiable to each other. We weren't defensive, right? So you would ask, I would say, and then you would challenge it, and then it would clarify, and it was like an afternoon. Like in an afternoon, Brian was a diehard anarchist, and at the end of it, he was a proprietarian anarchist, right? It was right, and he like in the conversation, you could see how pieces fell into place. But it was goodwill. And I don't think I've ever had a conversation that had that degree of goodwill anywhere else online. So the proof of it's right there at the bottom of my screen. Right.
Almost everybody that I've convinced to take a look at proprietarianism came from Stefan Molyneux group. And what happens is he's actually taken his viewers beyond where he's willing to go. And you should see him get in his own group getting a lot of pressure that, okay, we're getting past you now. You got to catch up to us. And the good thing about it is the group in general had there was maybe 100 people that would regularly talk there. And there was a lot of goodwill between us. So if someone suggested something, other people would give it a serious look. Okay. That were in the group. And when I suggested it, I would say maybe half the people came over and about half of those stayed. You know, like Warren Prescott and J. Warren Prescott and some of the others that came over from that. They came because, like you said, there was goodwill. There was a willingness to honestly discuss things, the facts of the matter, and not the individuals. And it was interesting. A lot of people came over, and I see names of people. And I'm like, I suggested this 6 months ago, and finally you're coming. You know. So
Prescott comes from Molly's camp then.
Yeah.
Because he's been all over him for 2 days now. It's been hilarious to watch.
Yeah. Well, what happened was he realized, all the people that came over were UPB, and my argument was UPB is not enough.
Right.
UPB and the NAP are not enough. Not that they're wrong, because if you say they're wrong, then people's biases, they're like, Stefan Molyneux helped me with my depression and my relationship or whatever, so I'm not going to go against him. No, okay, it's not enough. You need more than this. Oh, okay. Let's go see what the next step can be, because that's acceptable to people. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to tell people that their idea is wrong. If you tell them their idea is incomplete,
right,
then it's a lot easier to get them to look at it. And once you look at it, like Jonathan Prescott, he said, once I looked at it, he says, I couldn't deny it.
Yeah, then you can't unsee it after that.
Yeah.
That's
which either makes people go crazy and leave or go deep.
Right. Yeah. So and then a counter example to all of that is my goodwill to the GA group. I just have none of it with Josh. There is no goodwill at all. It's just not possible between the two of us. He's a smart guy. I actually don't dislike him, but we just can't talk.
There are probably target groups that we could what is it? We could target them. That's why you call them that, I suppose. If you move up from violence, so from the bottom, and you start with like guys who like MMA, things like that, they understand that things come down to whether or not I'm going to punch you in the face.
Yeah, and the same thing.
If they don't come down to that, like you're not really dealing in anything important anyway, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So there was the fighting crew. There's also the firearms area as well, because in both cases they have a respect for violence and they understand it. I'd had this mapped out somewhere. I think I put it in the general staff message at some point about mapping out certain paths. People will come in from certain backgrounds. So I came in from epistemology and philosophy of science. So I had a fairly good vocabulary on that area of P. But others will come in from politics, reading politics and geopolitics. Others will come in from biology. And I found that they're all paths into P, because eventually all of these ideas network together. There's no linear path through them. And they all share particular pitfalls. So the guys that are coming in from the politics side, so politics and ethnocentrism, not necessarily biology or philosophy, when they come into that from this group, they naturally gravitate towards monarchism and aesthetics and generative anthropology or anthropoetics. Whereas, what was the other one? From the biology, they hit their own hurdles when we start talking about violence. So if we understand what their background is and what their interests are, we know to put certain topics towards the end of that conversation or the end of that process so that they can fill in the gaps, get the general knowledge before they run into these walls. They hit the walls too soon. It does the opposite. It almost makes them enemies of us.
It's what the group should be for.
Yeah.
If we had the right newsletter, if you had a newsletter sign up where people could then get a drip feed of information, and we knew where we were pulling them from, which area, that could be ascertained with questionnaires and stuff. We could feed people through email the first 10 lessons that fit their needs specifically. If they're coming from violence, we explain that to them. If they're coming from politics, we explain how it's in their interests. And I think that could be very interesting. That's a lot of work to build that out, but it can be very useful as well. A way to, once it's done, it's automated, there's not much to do. Mm-hmm. And it will grab, hey, you want to learn about carpetarianism? 10 lessons specifically tailored for you. You just got to answer these 3 questions.
Well, that's what I was hoping to do with video. Playlists in a certain sequence on certain topics. So now, given that I just said, if people ever hit certain ideas too soon, is there a benefit to having groups, subgroups siloed off so that there isn't a lot of crossover? Should we have a biohistory group in Sheepdog that's separate from, say, militia training or martial arts or politics, and then only occasionally have messages that cross over them? And then we could be working on the guys that are coming up from biology, other ones coming up from philosophy. So like marketing funnels, but they would actually be educational pathways, educational algorithms.
Yeah, it would depend. I think you wouldn't want to start a group until you had at least one person willing to take responsibility for it.
Right, and it would have to be somebody
that would be how you. Yeah, and instead of thinking, I think there's this need, let's find a person, wait till people start volunteering.
That's exactly what I was working on. That's the core of the project, is just giving a framework so that if people have interests, they can pursue it that way. So back to my original question. Right now, I'm thinking of doing that where there's quite a lot of crossover across those books. They're not, or those groups. They're not necessarily siloed off. Like Gunther's group now is completely separate from our group. Should we leave it like that, and then maybe occasionally post across it, or do we have one group and then have these subgroups that are all very closely exposed to each other?
Could be awesome to get a once a week digest of the highlights of the week on the main group.
Yeah.
And by the way, in this group, you know, and that could be the job of each subgroup. You're going to write a highlight for the week for your group. What were the most interesting conversations? And you know, you got to do it in not too many words, because it's a highlight. It's not a complete recap. And do it like that. This way, it's less work for you too.
Take a look at the groups and the pages that are already linked together on Sheepdog and the proprietarian page as well, because there are a few that already cross over. We can find out which groups to subsume, the siloed off groups under, and whether they have big overlaps or small won't really matter. I found the importance is to be able to like click link through all the way without getting bogged down, without having to stop.
Okay, so that then goes again. So I think I've properly identified then that the key function of the main group is that a navigation, it's pathfinding, right? It's not content control. It's not any. It's essentially controlling access through navigation.
Hey, Bill, I think it's kind of like we've shared it before. It's the centralized model, decentralized, or distributed.
Well, and that's what I'm looking at now, is that I'm actually thinking in terms of clusters.
Right.
We're not necessarily a hierarchy. We're a cluster right
and
now around the Sheepdog brand, but now can we form subclusters?
Yeah, and I particularly like the idea that if we're reaching adoption, if it's violence, MMA, gun, military prepping,
Don't see why not.
You kind of want to have that as the central focus. You know, we get notifications that
My
somebody
thing right now is
posted
just
in a
learning,
group.
getting it to nuts and bolts of P. It'd be nice if every I don't know, maybe once a week or twice a week, we had Bill, you, and some of the other guys that are really well versed in proprietarianism would have a post. I know Brandon does an excellent job of that.
Yeah. But
just some a motivational post or something about P, you know, lesson of the week or something, you know.
Sure. Okay, I'm putting that on the list too.
That'd be great to get the new guys up to speed. Wow, you know, I've been into the prepping and training for so long, man. I don't know, you know. I guess you could go in several different directions with it, and I guess the thing is getting people that's interested in taking leadership and going in that direction and breaking off and forming subgroups. Right now, my main interest is in learning P and figuring out how I can apply this to my life and others, and how to move forward with it. You know, take this knowledge, be a benefit to you guys, be an asset. You know, be an asset to the group. Move this whole thing forward and apply it to my life and be a better person. One of my challenges.
The groups can lead people to localize. It's like if you take one of these groups and you become competent in that area, and people start coming to the group to discuss things with you, it's only so long before someone within driving distance joins the group, and then they know a few other people. Things spiral up quickly when you're online. It only takes one post to go viral for the whole thing to be a winning lottery ticket, essentially.
Yeah, and I think the angle for me is the offline network. So Elaine and Lucas and I all live close together. We've talked about maybe getting together for airsoft. Elaine says there's some people that he'd like me to sit down and chat with, and start doing stuff offline. And then I'm thinking that things like the YouTube and that is where it doesn't have to be SN specific. It can be whatever your interests are. Go set up a playlist. You own it. It's yours. Populate it. So if that's on airsoft techniques, or it's on firearms training or prepping, just keep loading it up. If you want to do your own video on it, put it up there. Maddie can do chocolate, like why not? And I think out of that, each of those people, if this becomes a place where you can pursue that interest, or one other place where you can pursue that interest and get some feedback, then it encourages investment in it without this notion of leadership or hierarchy. It's just let it happen on its own. It'll be your property. You build it out. Just treat it like a property, and the rest will respect it like property. A cluster forms and the hierarchy naturally appears. I think that's what I'm thinking would happen. Then that would naturally happen offline as well. We can start getting together. Elaine, we've got programming in common. I can maybe get him some work. You know what I mean? Like, we can start networking outside of an SN context as well. Help each other build a deck, put a Kickstarter together for somebody who broke his back, like whatever. Like, just start building a network of support, however means we want, as long as we're not venturing outside of reciprocity. Right.
Yeah, excellent. Love it.
Yeah.
Definitely. And by the way, it's actually, my name's pronounced Alan.
Oh, I've been calling you Elaine ever since. It's Alan.
Yep.
Okay. I stand corrected. My head will slowly turn red in embarrassment.
So, it's all right.
One issue I have down south is I'm surrounded by these diehard Christians. Holy crap. Every time I get into a damn conversation, Jesus is going to save us. I'm like, God, okay, all right. So one thing I've noticed about some of the Christians that I talk to about proprietarianism, they start looking at what Kurt's posting, and it's pretty straight. I mean, it's, Kurt's pretty blunt, man, with his assessment of Abrahamism. and a lot of them are turned off by that. So, man,
yeah.
I've got a hard bridge. It's a hard bridge to build, dudes. It's a hard bridge to build with these guys, and I'm surrounded by them. I'm a musician, and man, this is going to sound crazy, but I go to church every Sunday so I can play my guitar and be around some decent people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to. I mean, it's where I'm at. I have to, if I want to have any kind of community. So I'm not sounding hypocritical, but I have to swim in these waters.
Well, Edward Dutton said in a video the other day that as an atheist, he wants everybody else to not be an atheist so that he can be surrounded by decent people. And I think that's a good point. His name is Edward Dutton. He's a researcher. He's on YouTube now, called The Jolly Heretic. And I've
seen him. Yeah, I've seen that guy.
And I think his background is a history of religion. So he's saying that the religion is an evolutionary advantage, but atheism rises, and he's obviously some crossover of an atheist. He says, as an atheist, he wants everybody else to be not atheist, so that we have a decent world to live in, right? And I think that that's really the bridge, is that there's a cultural or societal advantage to religiousness. That's not what we have issue with. We just have issue with legal and claims to authority based on metaphysical lies. So for instance, my mother-in-law is very religious and very active. And I'm very much a naturalist. And so, it's kind of a sensitive topic. So I can't remember what the topic was on. I said something like humans have learned this ad hoc, and she said no, it was received from God, and I was kind of got quiet. And so I changed the topic, said, Protestants, she's a Protestant, are way overrepresented in charity around the world compared to every other religion. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, about 65% of world charities are Protestant charities. And Protestants are I think it's about 23% of the population. I said, I have nothing but respect for Protestant Christians. And then all the tensions went away, and now we can get along, right? We can have our different views on things, and that's not an issue anymore. Right? So I don't know. It's a tough one because after nearly 20 years involved in somewhat religious studies with Buddhism and Taoism and and then coming out of it through ration, just by questioning presuppositions, I have a pretty big bias against it. So one of probably the next one worst to Kurt about abrasiveness to Christians is probably me. Because I actually know the damage. I've seen the damage in people's lives, not just to say, well, that event. I'm talking about watching people over the course of 12, 15, 20 years, and how their world decays because of leaning on these kind of ideas, right? They're leaning on them rather than using them as a tool to their advantage. So yeah, I countersingle a lot. It's a tough nut.
It's tough, man. I'm surrounded by it, and I feel isolated sometimes. I feel alone. I'm trying to prep and take care of my family, and the end game of this whole situation is looking pretty dark, and it's tough. And automatically, as Christians, well, you got to be saved and born again in Jesus, and Jesus is coming. And what do you say? Rapture. And I'm sitting there just talking to myself. Okay, I'll just run through my little personal mental filter and smile, and it's tough. It's so tough, and I don't know how to bridge that gap at all.
Yeah.
I'm not a mystic. I'm like you. I'm a naturalist.
Yeah.
I'm not an atheist. I mean, I think there's someone that proclaims I'm a pure atheist. I think that's really hubris, man. That's really narcissistic. Because there's just so much we don't know. However, man, we got to find a way forward through this mess that the West has allowed itself to get into.
Yeah, and there's broader and broader context to that as well, because the current situation is a situation, and it's a fairly short one in a historical context. So I keep coming back to the same conclusion that what we're witnessing is actually just nature in action. We're watching a number of natural cycles, whether it's genetic cycles or complexity cycles. I think, who was it? Stefan, I think I was having a conversation with on it. The left-right thing that we have right now, we're never going to be rid of the left. There's always going to be people with that temperament in our societies. Just like we're always going to have people that are religious and so on. It's an expression of biology. And the breakdown that we're seeing is also a result of these natural cycles. And I think that informs us on how we can calculate what a desirable outcome is. Right? It's not just about beating the enemy. We have to play that game. There's no doubt we have to play that game. But in a larger context, we have to be looking at it going, the next preferable outcome is what? Because the end game isn't killing the enemy. The end game is what we produce after this.
Yeah, it's creating a prosperous, healthy white society.
Yeah, and the like, for instance, I draw off Anglo history a lot. There are threads going back long enough that we have a clear enough understanding what works. So really the battle right now is the things that we know work are the things that are being torn down. So that's what we have to fight and preserve. Things like, rule of law and isonomy and these, the culture supporting an individual, all that, these things that we know that results in human flourishing. And also its downside. Like, there's a lot of downside to the Anglo Enlightenment and modernity. I think for the most part it was good, but then they have these critical flaws. We need to correct those flaws and move forward. Anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Hey, Bill, I think you and Ray should definitely have one of those longer conversations. It's like a good intro and could cover a lot of ground, especially for Ray's.
Well, how do we move?
Yeah, Ray's.
Bill, how do you see us moving forward?
Audience.
What do you want?
Hold on, Ray. Hold on, Ray. Ray.
For us to move forward.
1 second, Ray.
Productive.
I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, I don't know, but Ray,
okay.
I'd like you to give more time to everybody else on here. And if you have a long conversation, Bill's ready to have that with you on a video. And I think that would be really rewarding. I think on this, Bill wanted to hit a number of points. So I want to make sure that we get through those, and I don't have too much more time.
My junk go down.
I had something from like a half an hour ago that I do want to get out. This is back when we were talking about introducing people to the concept. One of the things I took a run at with was the proprietarian truth test. And I think that's a great introduction for somebody to get the core concepts around relating it to the trivium. That you identify something, you do the falsification tests on it, and I had the paper up here, but it was a more exhaustive truth test. So it wasn't just grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It was structure, justification, and falsification. And of the notes, jumping in pretty early is looking at something as operational. And so effectively operational is moving it through different forms of the concept, like what's its scales and limits, what does it change into. That's where you see these things about a graph, that it becomes more it's not just one thing. You see it at different structures and limits. So it was the operational was in here. E prime was a concept that was identified. Identity, like I said, within the scopes and limits. The next of justification goes through, is it logical or internally consistent? Is it empirical? Is it categorically consistent? Is it rational? And is it moral reciprocal? That would be all under justification. The last stage is where I like a lot. Is it complete and fully accounted for? Is it coherent across all tests? Is it actually testable and falsifiable, scientific? Is it parsimonious? Is it the only essential operation? Is it due diligent effort to avoid harm to others? Is it within the limits to perform restitution? This is the no free riding. And then last is the warranty of all above been performed, and you will pay if you've harmed others. So I also think Kurt's and the courses on proprietarianism is going to be a huge outreach. I like the idea of groups and stuff like that. One other reason that I think it was Daniel, Roland Anderson, and I talked about giving this tool so that people could kind of take this little takeaway, and when they go get involved in another argument, they might pick something out, like this isn't warranted speech. They might, of course, get the orgasm argument that's coming against them, or rally, ridicule, gossip, shame, and moralizing. They might figure that out, but in terms of presenting their argument or helping somebody else figure something is truthful or not, they can take them through the due diligence steps. So I tried to move that forward, and somehow it just stopped. And I think,
want to move it forward in our group then?
I think it's a good tool, man. Like, I remember when I first got grammar, logic, and rhetoric and the basic fallacies and stuff like that, I was blowing people away on Facebook. Like, oh, that's a basic ad hominem and, a circular argument, and just rallying through stuff. But that kind of just fed into the bickering, that didn't get to the depth that I feel that in terms of truth seeking that proprietarian offers, so that's why this more exhaustive list, which I didn't want to be super exhaustive, I wanted to condense it, and hopefully it could be a good takeaway that people, especially anybody who has a truth bone in them, like I argue pretty fiercely for the truth. And then if I have, and that it does come from goodwill, if I've seen reciprocal goodwill, but I certainly don't back off of something that it's not warranted. It's basically comes across as political propaganda, common academic rhetoric, that type of stuff. And so I know where people get stuck on proprietarianism, and I just think that if we're trying to push a big body forward, that giving somebody better tools to understand truthful, warranted, due diligent speech in a way that's understandable, and they start to get little pieces, then they'll actually, see the quality of our arguments, and they'll start to be able to apply that. That's like kicking the soccer ball. I think it does come down to good argumentation, and I thought that the truth test document would be one of the best ways to teach on the field, kicking the soccer ball in arguments. Okay, over.
Okay, so I think maybe this would be a third thing then. Then maybe you and I can sit down on a weekend and just go through the document. It's very much what I was trying to do on Gnostic Media with that sheepdog tooth video.
Yeah, it was born from that.
Yeah, it was even saying that it would probably take me another year before I could get something, teachable out of it. So you've got the foundation. I know you're working on it with Daniel. We should maybe do a video on that and maybe a slide deck, and that can be a video to help out guys like Ray as well, new guys. And I was also thinking the same thing, like with Matrix. If you wanted to use the new YouTube channel, put together presentations, whatever they are, in your own playlist on there, that could be another way of getting that message out as well.
Yeah, I like seeing how this personal narrative is coming more to the forefront. And
yeah.
My work definitely goes through with the examples of films and how these films work, and the proof that they worked could either be through large ticket sales, international, domestic. They can also be just from being a small niche art house film that has critical acclaim and people are total fans of it,
And understanding
so
why.
I do those. Say it again.
And having some insight as to why they are popular, because we do predominantly think in narratives, and that there are certain narrative themes that are probably hardwired into us. So understanding that becomes a useful tool.
Yeah, and then when you get the levels of meta, you can start to create your own. So you could do your own buddy love tale that has a rites of passage. So you can do certain crossovers, or maybe even examples in your life that you've already lived it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the personal narrative. And I know that my kind of subjective understanding that I made as objective as possible, it just, it got so much better after grammar, logic, rhetoric,
Yep.
Meeting you, getting deep into that whole spiel and that past chapter with those guys, and then the proprietarianism gave such depth to the understanding of truth, so that I do really want to encourage any sort of truthful hero to do really well in life.
Yeah, and I think that even we have our own narrative right now, because I think we're emerging on that. We're coming up on We're Great. We're about to enter a buddy love tale, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
So if you recognize that, then it kind of informs, well, what do I need to do to get the old, the bromance going? So
yeah. So in a golden fleece, it's not the miles, it's the mileage. It's like, what do the milestones? Sorry, it's not the miles, it's the milestones. And so one of the things which I see in our conversation here is we're already thinking about what those milestones are. How do we win the dodgeball tournament? What does it take? So one of the things I'd like to see is what kind of goals do we have personally and as a group in the we're great and you're not category,
Mm-hmm.
And if we start going at that, and one of the ways to inform that is you go to the very next stage. Once we have that, what do we get in? Well, life is great. And that, anyway, for another time and for another conversation, I just wanted to anchor the answer around a truth document or a truth test. I do think that men in particular who seek the truth, who seek decidability through argument, not persuasion or being convinced. We're looking for methods and measurement, and we can give a lot better tools to help that. And I think the guys would take a run at it. They'd understand proprietarianism better once they can start kicking the ball.
So we'll put both of those on the list. The truth document, which is really an extension of the trivium, or beginning at the trivium, leading into operationalism. So it's an important document. I watched you guys doing it, and was trying not to get too many of my own opinions in there. And you guys did a fantastic job on it. And then also the personal narratives at some point. because it is applicable to the group. We can see it playing out with the group right now. Anything else? Gunther, you sitting there with this very intelligent look on your face, and you're not saying anything.
Actually, my area of interest is quite simple. I'm looking for the way to gather people into the tribe or something like that. So tribalization, or I don't know how to call it, when you can invite people and organize them into kind of a tribe to direct themselves and to achieve something together.
Right.
So it would be really helpful and to have a certain, let's say, algorithms or certain procedures actually how to achieve it, how to get it right. So if anybody has any kind of materials or ideas how to do it, how to build your own tribe.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of us guys that are running these sorts of things are struggling with, because I don't think there's a set algorithm, and it seems like the really important factors to them are very sort of nebulous, because it's things like identity, right? So last year this time I put a lot of effort in. I come from a marketing background, so I put a lot of effort into the logos and stuff, and some of you guys had input on that as well. Because if you don't have things like symbols or a joining narrative, it's very tough to, how do you say, any investment we make is an extension of our identity. So being a part of a group isn't so much you being a part of a group as much as the group becomes a part of you. So if you don't have a way of attaching it to your identity, there's no cohesion, there's no loyalty, and there's no joy in being a part of it. So I think that becomes precarious, because to try to manufacture that beforehand naturally restricts the robustness of that identity. It almost has to come out of the group. You can't do it. You can't do it beforehand. So I lightly touched on it. Like the Sheepdog has a certain kind of narrative, but it's not really fleshed out. And we have a few symbols around that, but they're really just kind of logos. What we need now is to come together as a community, and out of this, we'll start to see symbols grow, and we'll start to see new narratives emerging, and that will flesh out that identity part. So what I'm finding, to get to the point, what I'm finding is there's this minimum threshold that has to do with identity that has to be reached before a tribe can form, and for that identity, there has to be a minimum number of the group already formed before it can happen. I couldn't find any other way around it but to say it has to happen organically and come out of the group.
I think that we can experiment in this area, and that could be anything. I mean, you can start from, I don't know, airsoft team or
exactly.
soccer team or something like that. I mean, neighbors, any other gathering can actually produce a tribe if you know what actually main components of the tribe are, and how to actually connect them together to make a good tribe.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. So you're suggesting maybe starting off smaller, which is essentially what we're doing right now. I know.
Yeah, kind of.
Because Ray, when you were talking about patches, you were talking about the few other guys that you trained with. I think a few months ago. Yeah. So I mean that ends up being.
What you do is you want to create interest, right? You want a neat symbol. You want a hat. For example, you want a hat or a T-shirt. You want to have the Sheepdog logo. You want to have it look real good. And when you're out with your buddies, they go, "Hey, what's that?" Well, I'm part of the Sheepdog Democracy Group. Well, tell me about it. Yeah. So you create interest.
And then,
And,
and I think what happens is you're starting to form your own local
you know the
tribe.
material?
Oh, did you hear me?
Yeah, that's it. And so you just go shooting. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I got a crappy computer set up, I guess.
I think what happens is mics cut in and out over top of each other. So
Got it.
So to Gunther's point, that really is what I'm trying to do here is set up tribes instead of tribes under the SN banner, and
Me too.
and then have that be regional and in person. All right, a LAN, not a lane, a LAN.
Same here.
That's right.
Okay. Any other input? Chris, you're here. Did you have any thoughts?
I'm trying to work them out. I've got a small tribe myself. I've got a group of probably 8 to 10 guys. My focus area is young adults, and the core of the group is really only 3 people, and we offer a proactive message, like a symbol, an identity, and something to strive for. And it's very easy to bring people into that banner once you have that established. We really just do masculine things. It's against the norms here. I mean, these people go to work. There's no masculine, like Manor Boone type collective anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what we see is you just epitomize that and you promote that as a small group, and people will naturally want to attach themselves to that. Just last weekend, I had a meetup, and I think we had 8 guys. And, one guy I met for the first time, he came down with some of his other friends that I've been talking to for a while. And we went and we climbed a mountain completely off the trail.
Nice.
And the day before that, we all went to the shooting range. Day after that, we all lifted weights in my garage. It's just
That's
building
awesome.
that content. It kind of needs to be there. Like you said, it's organic, but you can be proactive as in putting that symbol out there and allow them to attach themselves to aspire to be something better. And I find that the most, advantageous, the best way to really get people to attach onto it. And you don't even talk about the profiteering aspects.
Right.
It's such a lower level that, if they can understand, it's like, how necessary is it? But, the main 3 people of the group, including myself, we talk about it amongst ourselves.
Right. No, I like this. I wrote it down twice now. Something to strive for as a key element. So, a common vision for the future, which is something that I don't know why I didn't think of it before you said it. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add, it should be actually mutual insurance network, or where guys can, insure each other and help each other when there is a need.
Okay, perfect. Because that was what I was trying to get out of my face when I was saying networking in real life. A mutual insurance network, which goes back to negativa again. We can participate in our, in positive activities, but at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a support network, mutual insured network underneath it all. That becomes the strict structure. I think that's fantastic. I think Lucas is mute.
There we go. I'm good now.
Any thoughts there?
Yeah, well, in terms of I know we're talking about, talked a little bit about whether it be physical fitness, stuff like that. I've tend to build the strongest friendship networks through physical fitness with others. when we all have like common goals on, trying to better ourselves and stuff like that. And, being there for each other, giving each other compliments, and as well as, interjecting, oh, maybe you could do this better, do this. I found, like I said before, I built the strongest friends, that like the best friends that I've ever had have always been the ones that I've trained with. And in terms of the umbrella being SN and us having all these different groups that we're spawning, what should be the commonality in all these groups that we could then connect to SN? Because I know that people are trying to spin them off in their own ways and what they're proficient at, or what they want to grow in. What would you say would be good to have as like kind of the seeds, or I don't really know how to say it, the little different interjections
within each of the groups.
Correct.
I think that Sheepdog itself is a sentiment, not quite an idea. So that idea that the right sentiment to rule the world is the sheepdog mentality, those capable of violence using it on others' behalf. That I think is the description of our disposition. We're not all sheepdogs, because that's reserved for military people, in my opinion. I don't want some stolen valor thing going on. But the sentiment behind it is the same. I go work on other people's houses. 90% of the time when you're in renovation business, by the end of the job, the clients are not happy with anybody. It's just, no matter what you do, it takes too long, or you're not happy about this. You do what you can, right? So what kind of, purpose gets me up to still do the best I can for them every day? Well, I'm contributing to developing a home for that family to live in the next 10, 15 years. And that's contributing to building a better, Toronto that I can live in. So that's that sheepdog sentiment that I was getting at. And I think that's the core notion above it, which ties right back into mutual insurance network, because that's what Sheepdog is. Those that we insure each other through our own agency. What you're good at can help me where I'm weak. Where I'm strong, I can help you with that. And all of us together are strong. Mm-hmm. So we get into the historical context, the political context, and say, well, that's because we need to build a better middle class and all of that other stuff. You don't need to understand that. All you need to recognize is that that's the sentiment or the disposition that we're identifying with, and that's what glues us together, right? So some of us can be fleshing out the robust details around what that means and why that works and all of that. Others, fuck it, put a patch on, work out every day, try to be a better person, try to help each other be better people, right? Reciprocate, have each other's back, right? That's really what it is. And I think when I was thinking about it, that's because we have a sentiment which proprietarianism doesn't have. There isn't something to grasp onto in terms of an identity there. We have that with a narrative that becomes more personal. And I think that's why Kurt calls us applied P, because we're trying to apply this to our lives, right? Anything beyond that is wide open. Pursue all the goods you want in the world as long as they're not bad. And I think we can do that. All right. So do you guys want to wrap it up for now? I will roll this up onto the new YouTube channel. So there's going to be 2 things that I have planned this weekend. The old Sheepdog Howl videos I'm going to put up on the new YouTube channel, Sheepdog Democracy channel, and I'll post the link and rebuild the playlist there. I'm going to set up a few threads in the group that are themed. So I might have one on law and epistemology, one maybe on testimonialism, one on working out. The other thing too, Brandon, thank you for the suggestion on stretching, on hanging to stretch my shoulders, because it's made a massive difference. So and and then I find that I have a hard time staying on track with working out because I work long hours. So I want to set up another thread for guys that are just working out, and like we did with the 100 push-up challenge. Like, so I'm going to set up these themes and whatever content that I can grab without too much effort, because I'm old, I'll move them into those sections. Like Ray's got a lot of good videos, strategy videos, and that I'll move those into a section. I'll move some of the more recent arguments on law and philosophy into a section, and then I'll post those in the pinned message. I'll get rid of the other message, and then the pinned message on the group will just be links to these areas so that we can find them easily. Okay. All right. Anything else? Nobody else has any other comments? Thank you all for showing up. Great talk. I love you guys all. Thank you. You keep me from going insane. So
thank you, Bill.
I'm going to be putting more effort in now that I can. So, all right.
Good stuff. Good to see the turnout today.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Good job, all you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Here's the early seeds.
Yep, this is it right here. Okay.
Right on.
All right, so I'm going to leave. I'm going to end the meeting now, and then I'll reach out to you guys separately at some point.
All right, see ya.